May 1943, near Bizerte in Tunisia, exhausted German Afrika Korps soldiers finally surrendered to advancing American forces without further resistance. After years of propaganda promising Allied cruelty, these prisoners expected starvation, humiliation, and relentless physical abuse upon capture without mercy. Instead, American MPs offered water, cigarettes, and medical care, challenging every preconception instilled by Nazi indoctrination since the earliest training. Transported to temporary holding camps, the Germans noticed orderly procedures, ample rations, and unexpected respect from their captors almost immediately. Within days, they were boarded onto Liberty ships bound for the United States, still bracing for harsh treatment upon arrival. The transatlantic journey bewildered them further, as crews served hot meals, fruit, and even occasional ice cream during perilous waters. German officers whispered disbelief, realizing American logistics could spare luxuries for enemies while fighting global war on multiple distant fronts. Upon docking in Norfolk, Virginia, crowds barely noticed the prisoners, evidence of a nation unfazed by their presence or threat. The POWs were transported inland by clean, well-ventilated trains, guarded lightly, and fed at every stop without punitive oversight. Arriving in vast barbed wire compounds, they found barracks with mattresses, showers, and functioning heating systems despite wartime resource shortages. Each man received new clothing, medical examinations, and identification tags following Geneva Convention protocols meticulously respected by Americans in full. The first camp meals stunned them most, featuring meat, vegetables, bread, and dessert portions exceeding frontline officer allowances without restriction. Some prisoners wept quietly, remembering hungry families in Cologne and Hamburg struggling under Allied bombing and rationing back in darkness. Rumors spread that Americans deliberately overfed captives to weaken German resolve, yet reality felt undeniably generous beyond calculated psychological warfare. Even veteran NCOs admitted confusion, questioning how an allegedly decadent society could sustain such organized abundance amid total global conflict. Guards encouraged recreation, issuing sports equipment, library books, and musical instruments to maintain discipline and morale among former battlefield adversaries. Daily routines included roll call, work details, and evening leisure, closely monitored yet remarkably humane by wartime standards across continents. Letters home described unbelievable conditions, prompting disbelief among relatives enduring hunger, cold, and relentless air raids in devastated German cities. For many, the journey from desert surrender to American comfort marked the beginning of ideological unraveling beneath unexpected kindnesses offered. They had been defeated militarily, but the true shock awaited them in the cafeteria lines of freedom and plenty combined. On June 1943, Camp McCain in Mississippi, rows of wooden barracks lined with American flags greeted the arriving prisoners from Europe silently. Expecting bayonets and barking dogs, the German captives instead found calm guards offering directions, water, and reassurance without intimidation. Inside the mess hall, they encountered long tables filled with bread, butter, beef stew, and even apple pie portions served freely. The prisoners stood stunned as American cooks ladled steaming food, showing no resentment despite recent combat across distant continents. Forks and spoons replaced the tin cups and crusts they associated with captivity, creating an atmosphere of surreal comfort entirely unexpected. Each man received a metal tray overflowing with calories, exceeding even pre-war German rations enjoyed during peacetime prosperity before conflict. The guards encouraged seconds, insisting no food shortages existed, contrasting sharply with the propaganda of starving American civilians printed recently. One corporal whispered in disbelief, recalling that his sister survived on turnips and black bread beneath collapsing rooftops back home. At night, soft mattresses, wool blankets, and electric lights removed all remaining fears of dungeon-like imprisonment under hostile supervision. Medical staff inspected everyone for disease, distributed vitamins, and treated injuries without discrimination, following Geneva regulations to precise standards. Soap, towels, and razor blades were available, shocking men accustomed to scarcity, lice, and aching filth from prolonged desert campaigns. Even the camp fences looked symbolic rather than threatening, with minimal guard towers in view of basketball courts and baseball fields. American children sometimes waved from beyond the perimeter, unaware these men once fought beneath swastikas across burning villages overseas. The prisoners initially suspected manipulation, believing this generosity masked an attempt to harvest information through deceptive kindness strategies. Yet days passed without interrogation, no threats, only casual invitations to work, learn English, or join choirs entertaining communities. Some doubted reality, imagining secret cameras or hidden microphones recording their reactions to generous portions of meat and milk. When weekly pay stubs arrived for assigned labor, they realized financial freedom existed even inside barbed wire boundaries, improbably humane. The camp store sold candy bars, cigarettes, postcards, and Coca-Cola, priced at 5 cents per bottle, without embargo. For men who once viewed America as culturally inferior, this abundance undermined every lesson taught in Nazi classrooms nationwide. Gradually, they grasped a stunning truth. America was wealthy enough to give luxuries to enemies fighting against their very existence. On July 1943, Fort Robinson in Nebraska, afternoon sunlight glinted across vending stands stacked with glass bottles of Coca-Cola, awaiting eager buyers. German POWs gathered curiously, fascinated by the fizzy drink they had only encountered in propaganda images mocking American decadence. The first sip delivered shock, the sweet carbonation bursting across tongues unaccustomed to frivolous beverages amid wartime Europe's grim shortages. Laughter spread as men tasted again, realizing this was not a myth, but a 5-cent luxury available daily. Coca-Cola quickly became a symbol of American mystery, a drink so commonplace it required no ration ticket whatsoever. Prisoners calculated how many bottles equaled their camp paycheck, marveling at the affordability even by captured soldier standards. Each bottle was identical, cold, branded with perfect lettering, an industrial marvel impossible under Germany's bombed factory conditions currently worsening. Officers debated whether such abundance indicated moral corruption or strategic brilliance, as sugary pleasure replaced ideological resistance gradually dissolving. Reports from visiting Red Cross staff confirmed identical rations nationwide, proving Coca-Cola was not a staged deception targeted specifically. Alongside the beverage came casual waste, half-eaten sandwiches, discarded pastries, and untouched fruit baskets visible during cleanup operations daily. The camp kitchens served iced tea, lemonade, and fresh milk, leaving the prisoners to wonder how Americans avoided shortages entirely. Even Sunday services offered donuts and coffee, extending hospitality beyond military structure into cultural rituals foreign to German discipline. The overwhelming normalcy of comfort unsettled them, challenging deeply rooted beliefs about American weakness, softness, and supposed inferiority. Powdered cocoa, chewing gum, and chocolate bars enhanced this sensory invasion, creating flavor memories these men never experienced previously. They wrote letters home describing Coca-Cola bottles as icons of civilization, symbols of power based on surplus rather than ideology. Some enclosed wrappers, knowing families would treasure even the paper from a world overflowing with sugary miracles unimaginable. Prison guards joked easily with prisoners, sometimes accepting traded carvings or crafts in exchange for candy or soda privately. This growing familiarity lowered barriers, proving kindness could disarm more efficiently than fear, humiliation, or indoctrination employed ruthlessly elsewhere. Each gulp of Coca-Cola erased a piece of propaganda, teaching that American strength lay not in flags, but refrigerators. Here, among baseball fields and soda machines, captured soldiers encountered a cultural bombshell more powerful than artillery ever deployed. August 1943, Camp Swift in Texas. The German prisoners entered the dining hall without anticipation, expecting routine sustenance and nothing extraordinary awaiting them. Then came the moment of surprise, when the American cooks arrived pushing large insulated containers filled with freshly made vanilla ice cream. Prisoners gathered around in silence as scoops of freezing sweetness were placed into metal bowls without any sign of restriction or scarcity. Most had never tasted ice cream before because Germany's wartime dairy supplies were prioritized for hospitals and children suffering malnutrition back home. The first spoonful delivered a cold shock, melting instantly on their tongues, dissolving years of rationing and ideological certainty with astonishing ease. The dessert quickly became more than a treat. It embodied a powerful statement about American abundance and confidence during global war. The guards explained that ice cream was a standard Sunday serving, considered essential for boosting soldier morale at home and abroad. German officers, once dismissive of American culture, suddenly found themselves contemplating the psychological strength hidden within simple pleasures of dairy and sugar. Even the most disciplined among them admitted that this unexpected generosity shattered illusions taught under strict Nazi propaganda back in Europe. Here was a society so wealthy it could afford to give its enemies dessert during the height of conflict without hesitation. As weeks passed, the ice cream continued without interruption, proving it was not a temporary display, but a norm fully sustained. Even in cooler weather, the frozen bowls arrived with chocolate syrup, crushed nuts, and bright cherries, astonishing prisoners accustomed to beet sugar. Liberty ships crossing the Atlantic were equipped with refrigeration units to ensure American soldiers never lacked ice cream, even on foreign waters. Such logistical sophistication revealed an industrial power capable of transporting luxury while still manufacturing tanks, planes, and ammunition in vast numbers. Prisoners realized that America's strength was not merely military, but deeply rooted in systems that mass-produced joy as casually as weapons. The more they tasted, the more resistance dissolved, and laughter returned to men who once swore loyalty to a collapsing Reich. Some prisoners wrote home describing ice cream with the awe usually reserved for technological marvels or heavenly visions in whispered prayer. Families in Germany struggled to even imagine such indulgence, their days spent queuing for stale bread and diluted soup amid ruins. By the time camp life settled into routine, ice cream had become a symbol of transformation, softening the hardest minds effortlessly. The revelation was clear. America conquered not through cruelty, but through comfort, serving freedom with a spoonful of frozen sweetness. On November 1943, Camp Atterbury in Indiana, the German prisoners gathered in confusion as guards prepared the largest meal they had ever witnessed. It was Thanksgiving Day, a holiday unfamiliar to them, yet the dining hall was transformed into a scene of overwhelming abundance and celebration. Long tables were filled with roasted turkeys, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, warm rolls, and pumpkin pies stretching endlessly before astonished eyes. Every man received a plate piled higher than any Christmas dinner remembered from pre-war Germany, when prosperity still seemed limitless and secure. The aroma of roasted meat triggered memories of childhood feasts replaced now by hunger and ration tickets left behind in collapsing cities. American officers encouraged the prisoners to eat freely, explaining the holiday's connection to gratitude, harvest, and national unity amidst wartime struggle. For the Germans, the concept of celebration during total war felt surreal, a sign of confidence impossible under Hitler's tightening grip on survival. As they tasted each dish, they began to understand that American identity was built not on fear, but on shared fortune. Forks scraped plates, men laughed, and for a brief moment, former enemies felt like welcomed guests rather than captives behind wire fences. The feast not only satisfied hunger, it delivered a message. America had enough prosperity to include its foes in sacred traditions. Musicians played violin and piano after the meal, performing hymns and folk songs, while guards and prisoners exchanged stories without formality. The presence of plenty made hostility feel pointless, eroding the idea that only German strength could preserve civilization under threat. One sergeant confessed he felt ashamed remembering propaganda comparing Americans to wasteful, weak consumers lacking spiritual and cultural depth entirely. Here, he witnessed a different truth. Generosity was not weakness. It was a rare kind of power built on shared prosperity. He realized a nation capable of inviting enemies to a holiday banquet was too stable to fear their existence anymore. Days later, letters written home described the Thanksgiving feast as a miracle. unthinkable among the ruins of Hamburg and Berlin. Families could scarcely comprehend that prisoners of an enemy nation ate roasted turkey, while German children scraped empty soup bowls. The prisoners now understood that comfort was not a privilege for the elite in America, but a right for all citizens. This revelation struck deeper than any political speech, transforming Thanksgiving into a weapon of ideology stronger than steel and fire. In the warmth of that November feast, the power of plenty quietly defeated the pride that once fueled their war. On January 1944, Camp Gordon in Georgia, the German POWs lined up for daily rations. Each man handed something entirely unexpected and astonishing. Alongside the standard meal sat a Hershey's chocolate bar, its silver wrapper untouched, its value far beyond its humble appearance. Most prisoners had not tasted real chocolate in years. German factories diverted to synthetic substitutes as the war drained every resource. The sweetness melted on their tongues, stirring emotions they had buried beneath sand, smoke, and endless orders from distant officers. In that moment, the candy bar became more than food. It became proof of a society overflowing with comfort despite global war. The prisoners soon discovered they could purchase extra chocolate, gum, or cigarettes using camp labor pay freely distributed each month. Some saved their earnings to assemble care packages, slipping chocolate bars and tobacco into envelopes bound for starving families in Germany. These packages, stamped with American postmarks, shocked relatives who once believed Allied cruelty would crush their loved ones without mercy. Letters described shelves filled with butter, sugar, and sweets that German civilians had not seen since before Allied blockades began. With every mailed chocolate bar, the German home front received silent testimony of a different America than Goebbels insisted they fear. Officers and older soldiers struggled with confusion, their education steeped in ideology, teaching that decadence bred weakness without moral center. Instead, they witnessed a nation so wealthy it could use prosperity as propaganda, stronger than any broadcast on shortwave frequencies. Rumors spread among the ranks that American abundance might outlast Nazi victory, even if Germany somehow won the battlefield struggle. The ideological armor carefully forged in Hitler youth gatherings and party schools began to show cracks under the soft force of sugar. Men who once worshipped discipline and sacrifice now wondered whether pleasure and comfort might be greater human goals than conquest. The camp chaplain noticed the shift, observing that prisoners requested Bibles, English grammars, and farming manuals instead of political texts. They dreamed of post-war freedom not in Berlin or Vienna, but in Iowa fields or Chicago factories rumored to never sleep. Some even asked how to immigrate legally, their loyalty to Führer and fatherland melting like chocolate in the summer sun. By the time spring arrived, the candy bars were no longer novelties, but symbols of collapsing belief in German superiority entirely. In every bite, they tasted the truth. Abundance had defeated ideology, and sweetness had quietly conquered the hearts of soldiers. On March 1944, aboard a Liberty ship bound for New York, German prisoners experienced another jarring contradiction to wartime expectations of hardship and deprivation. These transport vessels, built rapidly in American shipyards, were packed not only with troops and supplies, but also with functioning ice cream machines. The German POWs watched in disbelief as American sailors lined up with metal bowls, receiving soft, cold servings of vanilla and chocolate. Even at sea, in submarine-infested waters, the United States ensured its servicemen enjoyed dessert, demonstrating a priority on morale unmatched globally. Each scoop delivered a message. America's industrial might was so vast it could produce luxuries even during dangerous Atlantic crossings under threat. German officers aboard tried to remain stoic, but the frozen treats melted more than ice. They melted discipline faster than speeches. Prisoners whispered that no Reich transport ship ever carried dessert, only crates of ammunition and barrels of sour cabbage tasting dreadful. The Liberty ships revealed a deeper truth about America. Efficiency and kindness were not separate values, but parts of a unified culture. Food was not merely sustenance, it was a tool of unity, relaxation, and quiet psychological warfare against fear and fanaticism together. Even the sailors, hardened by combat, joked and shared jokes with prisoners as they handed them sugared cones and friendly smiles. In comparison, German U-boat crews subsisted on moldy bread and canned meat, surviving in cramped quarters drenched in diesel fumes constantly. The contrast could not be ignored. One nation improvised survival, the other engineered happiness at sea, even for captured enemies nearby. Prisoners began to ask how a country could spare milk and sugar during war, while still producing endless destroyers and bombers. They realized American factories did not stop for war, they expanded, adding dessert machines next to assembly lines producing liberty and power. The indulgence of ice cream on a rolling deck became a symbol of national wealth built on freedom, not conquest and fear. By the time the Liberty ship docked, the prisoners understood that America fought differently, using morale as ammunition and comfort as armor. The men who stepped onto American soil were not just captives, they were witnesses to a civilization flourishing under pressure without collapse. Their journey had taught them a lesson no battlefield could convey. Prosperity was not a sign of weakness, but strength supreme. The Atlantic crossing did not just transport prisoners. It carried their collapsing ideology across waters warmed by kindness and cooled by cream. With every mile sailed, the ice cream softened the hard edges of belief, reshaping outlooks as surely as waves reshape the shore. On June 1944, Camp Ruston in Louisiana, the German POWs no longer walked with rigid shoulders or eyes narrowed by hostility and pride. Months of American hospitality had transformed their attitudes as they found themselves thanking gods for cigarettes, magazines, and daily kindness. Their conversations, once filled with certainty of eventual German triumph, now drifted toward admiration of American order and prosperity everywhere. Even seasoned non-commissioned officers, trained to enforce ideological purity, admitted quietly that they now envied the society they once despised. The steady rhythm of good meals, soft beds, and warm showers eroded anger faster than any harsh interrogation possibly could have. Many prisoners reflected on their past speeches, recalling how they once boasted of German cultural superiority and unshakable patriotism proudly. Yet here, in these barbed wire communities, they felt none of the fear or contempt they were taught to expect ruthlessly. Instead, they encountered a freedom rooted not in slogans, but in reliable systems that delivered comfort even during global catastrophe. They learned that American soldiers could question authority, state opinions, and still enjoy steak dinners and ice cream sundaes regularly. The contrast revealed a fatal flaw in Nazi ideology. Discipline without dignity produced only obedience, not genuine loyalty born from trust. Letters intercepted by camp censors revealed intimate reflections, men writing home about their shock at American fairness toward enemies, honestly. Some prisoners even encouraged their families to change loyalties when the war was over, dreaming of rebuilding life under democratic values. The camp libraries filled with self-taught English students, reading Mark Twain and Hemingway with hunger that once belonged to rifles. Guitar music drifted across summer nights, blending German folk songs with American ballads in a harmony unthinkable before surrender happened. These were not indoctrinated robots anymore. They were curious humans questioning how their leaders could demand hatred of such people kindly. American officials noted the shift, recognizing that comfort and respect could neutralize fanaticism more effectively than retribution and punishment. By treating captives like future neighbors rather than eternal threats, the United States quietly reshaped their values from inside out. Even after D-Day news reached the camps, there was no panic, only silent acknowledgement that defeat meant something different now. It meant returning home not with bitterness, but with a blueprint for a society based on abundance, not eternal struggle. These prisoners, once instruments of conquest, now saw that true power lay in generosity, and they admired the nation that proved it. On September 1944, Camp Ellis in Illinois, the ideological armor of the German prisoners began to fall away under steady, relentless waves of comfort. The simplicity of daily life, 3 meals a day, soap, books, and entertainment, worked quietly to dissolve years of structured indoctrination. Nazism had promised a world of struggle, sacrifice, and racial destiny, yet delivered only ruin, ration cards, and endless graves across continents. In contrast, American democracy offered ordinary pleasures to all people, not as privilege, but as common civic expectation without exclusion. Prisoners began to see their leaders as thieves of opportunity, men who stole joy in exchange for hollow victories and slogans. They questioned the ideology they once revered, now that they saw children outside camp receiving ice cream without special permission, effortlessly. They wondered why their own system had demanded blood while American schools distributed milk and textbooks like a birthright granted instantly. The propaganda calling Americans weak now seemed absurd. Weakness did not build factories producing chocolate, tanks, and liberty ships simultaneously. Strength was redefined, not by cruelty or vows of glory, but by the ability to create happiness in the shadow of conflict. The German prisoners realized that a regime based on deprivation could never compete with one organized around abundance and shared dignity. Some captive officers gathered quietly, speaking about post-war futures, acknowledging that their authoritarian vision had failed deeper than battlefields alone. They reconsidered the idea of superiority when their captors, supposedly inferior, fed them better than their own government ever had. The collapse was not explosive, but gradual. Every sandwich, soft bed, and laugh across a baseball field chipped away at old beliefs. What guns could not break, Coca-Cola did. What speeches could not shatter, Sundays and Thanksgiving dinners quietly destroyed with ease. The realization was painful, but liberating. The world they fought to conquer was already surpassed by one they once ridiculed and scorned. Minds that once marched to the rhythm of swastikas now dreamed of voting, of education, of careers beyond barracks and orders alone. Many secretly vowed to oppose extremism in the future, understanding that prosperity grew not from fear, but from freedom shared widely. The seeds of democracy were planted not through force, but through kindness, wrapped in chocolate bars and sweetened with ice cream. By the time repatriation approached, these men were not returning as heroes of a failed empire, but as skeptics of its cause. Comfort had done what conflict could not. It defeated Nazism by proving that dignity was stronger than dictatorship ever dared to believe. On January 1946, Bremerhaven docks in a freezing wind, the former German POWs disembarked from ships carrying them back to a shattered homeland. They no longer walked like soldiers of the Reich, but like men who had glimpsed a different world built on shared comfort and fairness. In their hands, they carried care packages, English books, and the memory of Coca-Cola, ice cream, and Thanksgiving dinners without resentment. These souvenirs were not mere tokens of captivity, but seeds of transformation, destined to change German culture from the inside quietly. For many, the returning journey felt heavier than the initial voyage, because they now knew how much their nation had denied uselessly. Back home, families gathered in rubble-filled apartments to hear tales of abundance that seemed impossible amid hunger and ruin. Children stared wide-eyed as fathers described vending machines, baseball games, and ice cream served freely to prisoners without fear. The stories spread quickly, reaching neighbors, church groups, and market squares, revealing a portrait of America far beyond propaganda limits. This quiet testimony undermined decades of extremist indoctrination, proving that prosperity, not domination, built stronger societies and higher spirits unbreakably. Even those shaped by war began dreaming of refrigerators, civil rights, and lives without banners demanding sacrifice for distant gods. Historians later called this the quiet victory, a triumph not recorded in battle maps or medal ceremonies seen publicly. It was a victory of ideas, where chocolate defeated censorship, Sundays shattered indoctrination, and soft beds destroyed superiority complexes firmly. American abundance became a weapon more enduring than bombs, planting doubt, hope, and longing in the hearts of former sworn enemies. The POW program showed that democracy could defend itself through decency, not just through battleships and bombers flying overhead relentlessly. It proved that greatness required not only strength, but generosity, offering freedom's riches, even to those who once marched against it proudly. By the war's end, Many former POWs became advocates for transatlantic friendship, helping rebuild Germany as a partner instead of a rival. Their respect for American values influenced families, jobs, and future politics, laying groundwork for peace built on mutual admiration and stability. The truest battlefield was not in North Africa or Normandy, but in the hearts of men reshaped by unexpected kindness amid chaos. This legacy remains largely uncelebrated, yet its impact endures, echoed in a reconciled Europe and a world learning from humane victory wisely. When ice cream conquered hatred, it proved that sometimes the mightiest power in history comes not from force, but from simple human generosity.